we really have to think about, who was it that modeled self-care, self-love, and rest for you? What were the messages that you received as a young person about the value of rest, the value of spiritual practice? And then I think it's really important for us to be able to identify exactly what our resistance is to resting. Because it's really easy to say, oh, I can't fall asleep, or I can't rest, or I can't sit still, right? But when we inquire, the question is why? Because when we uncover why, then we have a chance at finding what the antidote is.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Living Well podcast. I'm Stephanie May Potter, and I'm here with my co-host, Marnie Dotches-Marmette.
We created the Art of Living Well podcast to empower you to live your happiest, healthiest, and most authentic life. Each week, we will bring you inspiring and motivating conversations covering health and wellness topics, including fitness, mindset, food, travel, product reviews, and strategies from a variety of experts, including our own bank of knowledge.
We are excited to educate, motivate, and inspire you to change the way you perceive health and discover your art of living well. Get ready to feel inspired.
Hello, and welcome to episode 102 of the Art of Living Well podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to give a shout out to Clean Crafted Wine, since we're now deep in the heart of holiday season. Did you know that mass-produced wines contain chemicals, additives, pesticides, added sugar, and high amounts of sulfates? As you know, Stephanie and I are both passionate about clean living, from the food that we eat, the water we drink, the products we use in our homes and on our skin, and this is why we also love Scout and Cellar wine so much. We joined this company because of their mission and values, their desire to create clean crafted wine. They partner with these small farmers around the world, and they make it really easy to have the wine delivered right to your door. So what is clean crafted wine? It's typically produced on sustainable farmland, created in small batches, lab tested for quality, and it contains zero chemicals, added sugar or additives, very low sulfites, and it's, like I said before, independently lab tested twice before you enjoy it. We have so many favorites, so please reach out if you'd like our current list of recommendations. And just to name a few of our favorites, we love the Dove Hunt Dog label, Comte de la Terre, I Love Middle Jane, at Nico. So if you're interested in trying out the wine risk-free, simply click the link in our show notes. And if you're ever not completely satisfied with your wine, Scout and Cellar will always do the right thing and refund or replace your bottle even after you already drank it. So check out Scout and Cellar and let us know what you think. Also, before we dive into today's episode, we would be beyond grateful if you would leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It takes just 2 minutes and really helps us reach more people so others can benefit from the inspiring conversations and resources that we share each week. If you're enjoying the episode, we'd love it if you'd share it with a friend, family member, or really anyone that you think may benefit from the information. And of course, feel free to share it on social media as well. And now we are thrilled to introduce today's guest, Tracee Stanley. Tracee was first introduced to the practice of Yoganidra in 2001. She immediately recognized it as a healing salve for the world and began to incorporate it into her life and her yoga teaching. She left her high-stress career as a Hollywood film producer to delve deeper into the study of the practices that were empowering and rejuvenating her so she could share them with others. With over 20 years of experience, practice, and teaching in the Himalayan Tradition, Tantra and Sri Vidya, she also understands the demands of life as an entrepreneur, wife, and stepmom. Her effortless way of sharing ancient teachings in accessible ways is her superpower. She travels extensively to offer yoga, nidra, meditation, self-inquiry, teacher trainings, and workshops. Radiant Rest, published by Shambhala Publishing, is her first book. We had such a beautiful conversation with Tracee, and her voice alone is so calming. We loved learning all about yoga, Nidra, and what it actually means and how one can start to practice yoga Nidra. We also dove into her new book, Radiant Rest, which was written to help a person develop a powerful practice of deep relaxation and self-inquiry. And we talk about how that book and the accompanied downloadable audio meditations can really help a person. Tracee provides tips for people that are struggling with insomnia and in general, just lack of rest. So let's jump right in with Tracee.
But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Good Health Sauna. It's time to relax, rejuvenate, and renew. Everybody wants to feel better. Everybody wants to be healthy and happy. Good Health Saunas is proud to provide top-of-the-line infrared saunas that deliver the most impactful results for overall health and wellness. Infrared saunas produce penetrating heat to help you sweat and heal your body from the inside. Sweating on a regular basis can help you feel amazing. Numerous studies have been done to show the power of infrared sauna use to help you sweat. Health benefits of regular sauna use may include detoxification, immune system support, muscle repair, chronic pain relief, relaxation, deeper sleep, and so much more.
There are a lot of reasons people buy Good Health Sauna. I just recently bought one at the Minnesota State Fair, and I am loving it so far. From the moment of purchase to the delivery and setup, Good Health Sauna staff have been amazing. They answered all my questions, and they did a fabulous job with the installation. I look forward to my new evening routine where I take a 30 to 40 minute sauna before I shower and go to bed. And I love how relaxed I feel, and more importantly, how I am adding to my overall health and happiness. And best of all, it's a great way to remove toxins from my body daily. Good Health Sauna provides commercial-grade infrared saunas for in-home and commercial use, backed up with the best warranty in the industry, lifetime guarantee, and unmatched customer service. They have 3 stores, one at the Mall of America in Minnesota and 2 in Wisconsin, Appleton and Waukesha. For more information and to purchase online, go check out your special offer at www.goodhealthsaunas.com/theartoflivingwell. Hi, Tracee. We're so excited to have you as a guest on our podcast today. I first learned about you from my mentor and friend, Betsy Weiner. Years ago, she suggested I buy your Empowered Life Self-Inquiry Oracle deck. And I really loved the format of that deck, the 40 days of 40 questions. And, I went through that deck a number of years ago and really enjoyed it. And more recently, I had asked Betsy I told her I wanted to do a meditation training, and she recommended you immediately and referred me to your course. And I took that during the summer of 2020, which was a great summer to be doing that during the height of the pandemic and lockdown. And those sessions together just really helped ground me during the summer. So now here we are today. I've wanted to have you on our podcast since I took that course. So I'm so happy that you're here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, first, I want to say we love Betsy. So thank you, Betsy, for making the connection. And the meditation teacher training that happened in 2020 was a really powerful training, not because of me, but because of everybody that came to the training and the time that we were in. It was really potent, and it was really, I think, a great example of how to use the practice in life. So thank you for reminding me about that cohort, because it was really special.
Yeah, it was a powerful course, I should say. Anyway, so I know everyone has a story, and we would love for you to share your journey on how you discovered yoga Nidra and left your high stress career as a Hollywood film producer to delve deeper into the practice that you found rejuvenating, and it empowered you and ultimately led you to publish the Oracle cards and then your book, Radiant Rest.
Wow. Well, that's a long journey. Do we have like 50 hours to talk about that?
In a nutshell. In a nutshell.
I'll try to make it as short and sweet as possible. So, my yoga journey really began when I had a moment of spontaneous meditation. And I didn't know what happened because I was just kind of minding my business, sitting on my balcony, watching the sunrise, and everything slowed down to this kind of pinpoint moment of peace and stillness. And that kind of sent me on an exploration to figure out what it was that actually had happened in that moment. And luckily, I had someone in my life at that time who pointed me in the direction of a spiritual bookstore and handed me a bunch of books and said, read these. And so I started with self-guiding myself through meditation, through one of Harsh Johari's books on the chakras. Had no idea what the chakras were, had no idea what I was reading, really. But the experience that I had of meditation was so profound just with the self-guiding, because this is before the day of having an audio that you can do on your phone. And then when I got back to the States, because I was living overseas at the time, I started to look for meditation, places where I could learn about meditation. And at that time, one of the only places that was really around was like the Zen Meditation Center. So I started meditation there, and then eventually found my way to yoga because of the physical part of yoga. I was a receptionist at the time, so I was like this all the time on the phone. And I remember going to get a massage, and the woman who was giving me the massage said, you should try yoga because your spine is going to be really curved by the time you get older if you don't do something about it. So I didn't know anything really about yoga. And I found my way into a Kundalini yoga class and practiced Kundalini every day for about 3-4 years until I actually found Hatha yoga. And then was practicing both. And at some point I found a translation of the Yoga Sutras, and I was going on a yoga retreat. So I thought, I'll just take this yoga book with me, this light reading with me on the yoga retreat. I had no idea what the Yoga Sutras were, which illustrates a little bit of an issue because I had been practicing yoga for, by that time, probably 5 years. And maybe someone had mentioned the Yoga Sutras, but the importance of the Yoga Sutras had not been highlighted. And so I took this translation of the Yoga Sutras with me on retreat. I immediately, upon starting to read it, felt this vibration kind of running through me. Did you ever have that feeling where you opened a book and it was like vibrating with the frequency? And I paused on one of the sutras, which was Sutra 136, that talks about this place within us that is this light that is beyond all sorrow, that is beyond all conditioning, all experience, that is eternal. And I thought, wait a second, this is like not anything I've ever heard before. And this is one of the promises of yoga, that we can actually begin to touch this place. And what I would say now is that we actually get to remember this place. So I did a real kind of shift in my practice where I started to look for teachers who were able to kind of lead me towards this understanding, and a little bit more philosophical and philosophy-based rather than asana-based, and understanding that there was more to yoga than just the postures that I was doing and trying to like hold handstand in the middle of the room. And so that's what began the journey. Luckily, I was already in my career as a film producer when I discovered yoga. I was actually an intern at the very beginning of my yoga journey. But when I discovered Yoganidra, which was probably about let me think about that, probably about 6 years into my yoga journey, my career was kind of taking off at that time. I was very busy. I had a whole team of people that worked with me. And I was introduced to the practice really kind of unceremoniously. It was in the middle of a satsang with a teacher. And the teacher at the end said, "Lay down. I'm going to lead you through a practice." And I thought, well, this is really weird. We haven't done any movement whatsoever, and we're laying down in Shavasana. What is this? And so I was led through a practice that I would now probably call something closer to deep relaxation as a technique. But when I, first of all, it was like, okay, we're on the right ankle. And now all of a sudden we're like, coming to what happened? Where did the time go in the midst of this? And at the same time, I feel like I touched the same place that I did when I was on that balcony the very first time. And so it was a remembrance of this feeling of like inner stillness and inner peace. And I started to practice with teachers who were really practicing and teaching deep relaxation as a form of shavasana, as like a guided shavasana at the end of class. And when I started teaching myself, I started to offer these practices of deep relaxation until I learned that they were actually part of the Yoganidra techniques. And, for me, as someone with a very busy life, working 16-hour days was very normal in the film business, even longer sometimes. That what I noticed was that my yoga practice, and specifically my Yoganidra practice, allowed me to feel more rested with less sleep. And it allowed me to be more clear, more joyful, and also to actually be more productive, because I was able to kind of creatively and innovatively figure out solutions to problems much more quickly. And so that was the journey that kind of started to infuse Yoganidra into my daily life and into my work life as well. That has kind of led to where I am right now.
Wow, what a beautiful story. And what you kind of said at the end was that Yoganidra and these practices allowed you to feel more rested and clearer and more joyful and more productive with less sleep. I mean, I think that's going to attract, a lot of our listeners right now are probably like, "Oh, how do I do that?" Right? But before we dive into and unpack everything today, can you just explain what Yoganidra is? And I know sometimes it can be hard to explain, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but for a lot of our listeners, even those who may be practicing yoga, they may not have heard or at least not experienced Yoganidra.
Thank you. That's a great question. So, Yoganidra is translated as the yoga of sleep, right? And it really is this place where we consciously and intentionally bring ourselves into a state of deep sleep. And while we're in that state of deep sleep and on the journey towards the deep sleep, we are weaving our awareness and our consciousness through all of the states of consciousness. So we can think about Yoganidra in a few different ways. I think the way that we most are familiar with it is as a technique, right? Is that we say we're going to go and do Yoganidra, just like we say we're going to do yoga, right? We don't actually think about yoga as a state of consciousness, right? We think about yoga as something that we do or that we perform. And Yoganidra is also a state of consciousness that's said to be very close to the state of samadhi, right? Which is, let's say, the final goal of yoga. It's the 8th limb of yoga. So that's kind of taking us back to the Yoga Sutras again. Yoganidra is also a goddess that is referred to in some of the texts, like the Devi Mahatmya. And so we can think about Yoganidra as a technique that leads to the state of consciousness that is Yoganidra, peace beyond words, samadhi, the void, and also the goddess or the divine feminine force that presides over the entire journey, because this is a journey of nurturing. It's a journey of being held. It's a journey of being surrendered into the earth and allowing yourself to be held and to trust that you are unconditionally loved, right? So Yoganidra is this practice that is a technique of systematic deep relaxation that allows you to move in to a place of deep, deep rest. And so it's so many things that it's really hard to try to put it in a nutshell. But I would say that most of what we refer to, and this is something that Swami Vedabharati talked about a lot, that what we refer to as Yoganidra is actually just the preparation for receiving the state of consciousness that is Yoganidra. So even though we say we're doing Yoganidra, or I could, say I'm a Yoganidra teacher, I'm not teaching Yoganidra. I'm actually teaching the techniques that lead to you being in a place where it's possible for that grace to descend. Right.
And that's through the way you position yourself and the way you breathe and all of that, right?
It can be through a lot of things, but the way that it's generally taught is that the body needs to be fully supported and comfortable. And that posture of support is different for everyone. So we really have to give ourselves permission to kind of explore the use of props, the use of blankets, the use of different ways of positioning the body, especially if we're someone who has suffered from trauma or PTSD. We're also being asked to be aware of the breath, right? And so we know that when we start to pay attention to the breath, our awareness starts to move inward as opposed to outward, right? So we start to move more into this place of pratyahara, which is withdrawal of the senses. And at the same time, when we breathe diaphragmatically, we start to bring ourselves more into a rest and digest mode and away from fight or flight, which is that place that most of us are in all of the time, right? With all of the things ringing and all of the buzzing and social media, whatever else. And so the rest and digest mode allows us to understand that, yes, we can release and we can relax. And as we start to do that, then we may actually be brought into a place where we're being asked to bring awareness to certain parts of the body, right? And maybe we're being asked to relax those parts. Maybe we're being asked to just visualize things there. And we can really start to deepen our concentration, which allows us to drop into this place that's a little bit more meditative, that then allows us to move deeper as we're guided into this place of deep sleep and deep relaxation. So as we moved through all of those kind of things, we can think about the 8 limbs as well, right? So we already know that hopefully we're practicing the yamas and the niyamas and we know what they are. And if there's people listening and we need a refresher, I definitely recommend to go back and kind of look at the yamas and the niyamas, because those are ways in which you can start to weave yoga into life. But the comfortable supported position is like the asana, right? That's the asana, being supported by the earth. And then the pranayama is us being attentive to that diaphragmatic breathing. And that pratyahara is, first of all, we close our eyes. We allow ourselves to release awareness of the senses like sound and touch. And we keep withdrawing our awareness inward. So the scriptures would say like a turtle withdrawing its limbs into the shell. That's what's happening when we're going into Yoganidra. And Yoganidra is also a process of dissolution. So we're also dissolving awareness from the gross to the most subtle. And anybody who's been in Shavasana after maybe a long class has maybe felt that feeling of laying in Shavasana and not really being able to tell where the body ends and the floor begins, where you start to feel like, oh, wait a second, I can't feel my body anymore. I'm actually feeling energy. And this energy is like feeling really expansive, right? And we start to become aware that we're actually more than just the physical body, that we actually are something much greater than that. And so we can think about this idea of pratyahara as being this withdrawal of the senses so that we can re-assimilate into our true nature, so that we can remember our true nature. And that is really why we have yoga. Yoga is this practice, and Yoganidra specifically is this practice of self-remembrance. It's a practice of smriti, of remembering the true self. That's the journey that we take when we're practicing Yoganidra. That is the dissolution of name and form, moving into that which is real. And so that's the deepest version, really. And I shouldn't say the deepest. There's many other things about Yoganidra, but that's one of the deepest kind of journeys of Yoganidra. And at the same time, if you have insomnia or you need to deeply rest, it's a very simple rest practice, right? So you can really cultivate a relationship with the practice depending on what your needs are.
So I have so many questions about that. So in terms of, the phrase kind of yoga sleep, I understand that it has both positive and negative connotations for people. I think some people hear yoga nidra and they think, oh, I'm going to lay down and go to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not going to. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that has to do with the misunderstanding of what the practice is, right? The practice is not a yoga nap. The practice is actually a practice that is meant to wake you up to your life, right? So there's sayings in some of the scriptures that talk about the wise man being the one, and we can say the wise person. I'm just updating it now, but we can say the wise person is the one who is awake when the rest of the world is sleeping. And that refers to this practice of Yoganidra, of being awake and aware in all of the transitions between waking, dreaming, deep sleep, and what's called the fourth state, which is the fourth state called Turiya, which is said to be very similar to Samadhi. It's said to be a void that's both empty and full. It's said to be peace beyond words. And so it's, when we think about this idea of sleeping, we can really think about this idea that we are asleep in the waking state. How many things are we asleep to in the waking state? Mm-hmm. How many things are concealed from us because we haven't actually learned, we could say, how to sleep with awareness? And then when we come back into the waking state, we have a different kind of awareness. We have a different kind of wakefulness. We have a different kind of consciousness that's weaving through our day. And so yogic sleep, we can also think about the etymology of the word nidra, which comes from ni and dru, ni meaning void and dru meaning to draw forth from. That means that there's something that comes back with us from the void. There's something that comes back with us from this practice. But we only get to hold on to it, remember it, feel it, embody it when we are awake, right? The normal thing is we do our Shavasana, after our yoga class, we roll over and we're hop to back to the doing. We don't actually savor the liminal space, right? We don't even savor the liminal space when we wake up in the morning. When we have an alarm clock, we buzz right through that liminal space. But there's so much wisdom in that space. It's another transition. It's another void. And so it's one of the reasons why I ask people to free write and to journal directly after practice, so that there is this retention and of whatever happened in the practice. You know, I can't say what's going to happen in the practice. It's different for everyone, but at least we can have a way to remember it. I mean, and that came from a very jarring experience that I had, where I was in a class and I was in a very deep state of consciousness. And the person who was leading the class was basically running late, and it was the last day of the workshop, and everybody was needed to get to the airport. So they basically ended the Yoganidra. Everybody was very deep in this Yoganidra, and like a lot of people were very deep in the Yoganidra. And then it was like, time to go. We have to leave. And I was like, whoa, this is not this, you know, I'm not in a place where I can get into a car. And all of these things had happened and wisdom had come in during the practice that I wanted to remember. And I knew that if I didn't write it down and I didn't capture it, it was going to just be gone because it was so subtle.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It's very powerful. You know, it just sounds like this practice really allows you to tap into your inner knowing.
Well, you know, yes, that is my understanding, that the teachings of Tantra are about being led to the inner teacher, right? It's being led to the inner knowing. And I feel like, you know, in a time when the external teacher and the outer so-called guru are failing and falling, that it's ever more important for us to cultivate that relationship with our inner knowing and inner teacher. You know, so what I would say is, if anyone is listening and they have a teacher who is really making the student reliant upon them for their knowing, if you feel like you're outsourcing your knowing to someone else, it's not to say that you don't have a mentor or you don't have a guide, but that mentor or guide should be guiding you to be self-reliant and to be able to have understanding of, what does it feel like to have intuition? How can I build my intuition? How can I touch my inner teacher? How can I have a relationship with my inner teacher? That, to me, is what yoga practice is about. It's not about having some outside teacher who gets to tell you what to do and how to think all the time.
I love that. And I think that's such powerful advice in all aspects of life, not just even in terms of like, you know, yoga nidra, you know, about what you eat, about how much you move your body, about how you spend your time with other people. That's all within us, right? And, you know, we can hire as many coaches and helpers, mentors, whatever you want to call them, kind of people, to get that external validation or whatever. But at the end of the day, we all have to look inward. And I love the way you so eloquently said that.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's very important.
So can you talk a little bit, Tracee, about how yoga nidra affects our brain waves?
Yeah, so, you know, this is something that we can send a link for the show notes for people who want to go a little bit deeper into this. But in the 70s, there was a couple named Elmer and Alice Green that worked for the Menninger Institute. And they were actually the pioneers in clinical biofeedback. They had heard that there were people who could shift parts of their autonomic nervous system. So things that should be involuntary, that they could, with their own intention and power of mind, that they could shift things like their blood pressure, like their heart rate, like these sensors of pain. So there was one guy who could put a needle into his arm and nothing would show up on the EEG that was registering that he was experiencing any kind of pain. They heard about people in India who were able to put themselves intentionally into a state of deep, dreamless sleep, aka Yoganidra. And so basically they brought one of the swamis to their lab in, I forget where it was. I think it might have been in Virginia, but I'm not sure. Menninger Institute, anyway. And what they discovered was that this Swami was able to put himself into a state of deep dreamless sleep, moving into theta and delta. And on the outside, he appeared to be sleeping. The brainwaves showed that he was sleeping, that he was in such a deep state that all of his external awareness really should have been shut off. There would have been no consciousness, right? And after the experiment was over, they said, oh, well, all you did was just go to sleep, right? Because what they could see was that it looked like he was sleeping. And he said, no, here's the conversation that you were having while you were doing the experiment. And he basically repeated back to them. And so they did this experiment a number of times. They even went back to, went to India and found all these different sadhus and saw that a lot of them had the very same capacity to be able to do this. Years later, one of the Swami's students by the name of Swami Vedabharati decided that he wanted to try to replicate these experiments. And so he went to the Center of Noetic Science in Petaluma and basically was talking with one of the scientists. They had the EEG things on his head. And as he was talking, the technician said, hold on a second, wait, he's in delta state already. And they were both, the Swami and the scientists were both shocked. They're like, no, this can't be possible because we're having a full conversation. And the technician looked back and said, no, he's in delta state. And so the teachings say that when someone masters Yoganidra, they can enter this state of Yoganidra at will.
Wow.
And so
That's powerful.
talking, it's very powerful, right? And so it means that we no longer need the technique. We no longer need the technique because we have cultivated such a deep relationship with the state that we can enter the state at will.
Have you met anybody that can do that?
Not that I know of.
I was going to ask Tracee if you could do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've met Swami Vedabharati. And what I can say is, and when in talking to the scientist about this experiment that happened, he said he didn't know for sure, but that he thought that it could be possible that he had spent so much time in this state of Yoganidra that it had become almost his baseline brainwave state.
Wow,
right? It's not to say that there's only one brainwave state that activates at a time. There's many, but the dominant brainwave state was this delta state. And so who's to know? When I met Swami Vedabharati the first time, I remember him walking into a room of people who were chatting like people do in a yoga workshop when they're waiting for the teacher. And all of a sudden it felt like this wave of calm and peace entered the room. And when I turned to see what was happening, because everybody basically became quiet without even seeing that he was entering the room, it was like he had an aura of this vibration. So, who's to say? I think the only way we really know is by practicing, because the practice is the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
If we're lucky enough to have someone give us a technique and we practice it, we will learn so much more. And yes, we can learn a lot by books. We can learn a lot by teachers. But when we practice, we get to know ourselves at a deeper level, especially with practices like Yoganidra that kind of reveal to us so many things, from the way we think to our negative thought constructs to the resistance that we have to even resting, not only in our body, but in our mind. All of these things start to become very evident the more we practice. And we also then have an opportunity to release and surrender them, right? Whether it's in the practice or with the help of a therapist or with the help of a mentor in addition to practice. But the practice is really the teacher.
Well, and as we think about the practice, let's talk about your book, Radiant Rest, because you really authored that book to help a person develop their deep practice of yoga, Nidra, and really look into that self-inquiry. And I know it comes with some downloadable audio meditations. Can you talk about the book?
Yeah, so the book, when I was asked to write the book by the publisher, Shambhala Publications, at first I was like, I don't think so, because there's all these Yoganidra books, and there's really great Yoganidra books, and there's people writing Yoganidra books. And as I thought about it, I thought about a few things, because that weekend that I got the email from my editor, who would later become my editor, I had a few people who asked me, did I have a book on Yoganidra? Have I written a book? And the reason why they were asking was because they felt like I had some unique perspective about the practice that they hadn't heard before. And it's not to say that other people haven't been talking about Yoganidra in this way, but for whatever reason, at Wanderlust, they hadn't heard this. And so I started to think about what I had to offer. And what I felt that I had to offer was really a roadmap to cultivating two things. One, a relationship with Yoganidra. And two, a relationship with inner teacher. Those were the two reasons why I wanted to go ahead and write the book. And how I wrote the book was really a roadmap to how do I cultivate this relationship with Yoganidra in all of her forms, in the form of the technique, if I'm a teacher and I want to guide and lead the technique, in the form of the state of consciousness, if I want to just journey towards the deepest state of consciousness that I possibly can in Yoganidra, and also with the goddess, whether you want to think about her as a personification or even as Mother Earth, right? And so that was what was really important for me to do, and to also have these self-inquiry questions that help you hopefully to touch the inner teacher, to remember that there's a place inside of you that knows and knows that it knows. Because I think for me, that's the role of a teacher. It's not for me to write a book and say, oh, I know all about this subject, because I don't. I'm continuing to practice and I'm continuing to learn, and the practice continues to reveal to me more and more wisdom and more knowledge every single day.
So, Tracee, one thing I just think about when I'm thinking of, maybe some of our listeners, kind of putting myself in their shoes, like rest and sleep. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with, right? And like you said, we're in a fight or flight mode, most of us 90+% of the time. So, let's dive in and talk about the key benefits of radiant rest, and also just, how, practically speaking, even can we, encourage people, and I guess they need to find their own path, like you said, but to allow ourselves and accept that we do need rest, and it's our birthright. And, taking time to do this is not going to mean that you're not productive the rest of the day. I mean, you shared early on that it actually has helped you become more productive. But I think, telling someone to do yoga nidra versus a more, physical practice sometimes is a little, I don't know what the right word I'm looking for here is. It's
counterculture, basically, is what it is.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, it's counterculture. And I think that what we can do, because this also has to do with our memory and our retention, like the experiences and the lessons that we have learned and the ones that we choose to forget. So the question that I would ask is, when we were in the beginning of the pandemic with the lockdown, and you maybe had more time and, because we literally couldn't go anywhere, did you find yourself more rested or less rested? Did you realize, oh, wow, I have lots of energy? Or did you realize, holy crap, I'm way more exhausted than I ever thought I was?
Yeah. Is that a question for me or just for
It's
anyone?
a question for anyone listening, right? Is that if you found yourself to be surprised at how tired you actually were, it really means that it was revealed to you the level of exhaustion because you were forced to come to a full stop.
Mm-hmm.
You were forced to look at it. There was nothing to do unless you created a bunch of tasks for yourself. And there was no missing out on anything because there was nowhere to go. Right? And so we really have to think about and this is why I have these inquiry questions in the book, specifically in the chapter, what does it mean to relax? Who was it that modeled self-care, self-love, and rest for you? What were the messages that you received as a young person about the value of rest, the value of spiritual practice? And then I think it's really important for us to be able to identify exactly what our resistance is to resting. Because it's really easy to say, oh, I can't fall asleep, or I can't rest, or I can't sit still, right? But when we inquire, the question is why? Because when we uncover why, then we have a chance at finding what the antidote is to that.
That's a very powerful question.
Yeah.
I won't even begin to answer it right now, but
it really is.
I mean,
I had so many things going through my mind, even when you just asked that question. And then when you said, what was modeled for you? I'm thinking about what I saw my parents do. And I also have 3 children. And I'm thinking about, how am I modeling for my kids? So those are really good questions that I am going to dive into.
Yeah, they're on page, I think, 61 in the book.
Okay. Yeah, that's very powerful.
Yes, extremely powerful. Thank goodness my husband does a much better job of modeling rest for our children than I do. So I'm going to work on it though.
Yeah, it's important. It really is important because there's so many illnesses that arise from not being rested, not being able to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many reasons that can be intergenerational. They can be from society. They can be from being afraid that you're going to, miss out on something. So we really have to identify what is our resistance and then begin to craft antidotes to those resistances, because they're usually unconscious and they usually weave their way through our life in all facets of our life, which is why that wakefulness that we bring back from Yoganidra is one of the antidotes to being able to heal, because it doesn't really allow unconsciousness to thrive when we bring back wakefulness from this practice.
How do you suggest, like, if someone's listening to this, how do you, and they're, kind of like go, and this would be a big change for them to do some of the things you're talking about. How would you suggest a person takes the time to kind of turn inward on a daily basis or start that practice?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to ask yourself, do you want to consciously pause and receive healing? Or do you want to be forced to pause? You get to choose.
Pause now or pause later.
Yeah, you get to choose. And so when you make the choice that you want to create conscious pause, then you start in little increments, because it's really difficult to tell someone who's on the go, go, go all the time to lay down for 45 minutes, right? And a lot of times it's impossible because of the way we've structured our lives, that we don't actually have the extra 45 minutes. So what you do is you create these 2-minute little pauses where you just sit and be quiet and just follow the breath. And maybe if you have a teacher or someone who can share with you the practice of alternate nostril breathing, you just do alternate nostril breathing 3 times a day for 2 minutes. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and once before you go to sleep. And let that be the beginning of your pause, your conscious pause. And then maybe the following week or 2, you start to notice that you're doing it a little bit longer. And then maybe you say, oh, you know what? I'm going to lay down now for 2 minutes. 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the afternoon, and 2 minutes before dinner. Right? Just for 2 minutes, just allow my body to fully release and relax. And then let that just be a conscious practice that evolves over time. Again, the practice is going to be the teacher. The practice is going to maybe say to you, oh, you're finally letting go. You're finally resting. Here's a little bit more that we can do. And as if by magic, a lot of times, the new technique or the new teacher or the new book or the new podcast will arrive to give you more information, because now you've shifted your vibration into one that's actually looking to heal by resting.
Well, and that's perfect. That seems so manageable. I love it. Like, I think anyone could do that. And we'll link up some examples of video of alternate nostril breathing, because I think that's a great idea.
And it's so doable the way that you describe it, for 2 minutes, 3 times a day. Like, anybody can do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole chapter in the book. It's called the Householder's Flow chapter, and really that came from so many years of being with people in class, where I would make a suggestion for a 40-day practice, and they would say, "Oh, I can't. There's no way I can do that. I have 5 kids. I don't have time, whatever. And so I started to pull some of the things that I had been doing in my own life, working 16 hours a day on film sets. How was I managing? And being able to bring that back in to just help people reframe what practice is, because that's the other thing. The westernized version of yoga is this kind of construct of you have to practice for an hour and a half, you have to practice for an hour, in order for your practice to be worthy, in order for it to be a good practice. You can literally practice 5 minutes of wisely sequenced asana with breath and have the same effect, if not more, than some of the classes that are not as consciously taught, that are, an hour long.
So just thinking more about some things that people can kind of do to instill and become more, instill the state of rest that we're talking about. Can you talk a little bit and share your tips on like bedtime rituals and wake up rituals? Because all that I feel like plays into all of this.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the idea really, and this is continuing to kind of pull the thread on the householder's flow, is that you have to, and not that you have to, but one of the things you can do is that you can begin to see your life as a practice, right? Instead of I go to the studio or I turn on Zoom, my life is a practice. So that means that when I go to sleep at night, I consciously allow myself to enter the state of sleep by using maybe some of the techniques of relaxing the body parts systematically that I would do in a Yoganidra practice, consciously observing the breath, allowing my awareness to rest at the heart center, and maybe placing a prayer or a blessing or a mantra in my heart center, and then allowing myself to release into sleep. And then when I wake up and I have awareness of the liminal space. So I teach myself how to wake up without an alarm clock. And I have the practices in the book. It's called the mental alarm clock. And it's basically a way to wake yourself up without an alarm clock. So now you wake yourself up without the alarm clock, and then you're able to actually savor the space of the liminal. And so in that moment when you are in that hypnopompic state, from sleeping, coming into waking, you get to remember the prayer or the blessing that you placed in your heart. And once again, bring that forward as part of your wake-up ritual. You get to take a few moments of conscious breathing and picking up the journal next to your bed and either writing about your dreams or anything that comes forward for you in that liminal space so that you can remember, right? And if you have time, you can practice a 15-minute Yoganidra practice to start your day, followed by journaling and your cup of tea, and maybe sitting outside where you can let the natural light filter in through the eyes, so that helps with the circadian rhythms, which will help you later on when you're trying to go to sleep at night, right? Mm-hmm. And so in the middle of the day or any time during the day where you have moments to consciously pause, you can do those alternate nostril breathing. You can lie down for 3 minutes. You can literally, if you are lucky enough to be somewhere where you can lie on the earth, you can lie on the earth and you can practice a grounding practice, which is also in the book, which allows you to retune yourself to the vibration of the earth, right? Which people will find very rejuvenating. So these are all little things you can do.
Those are all great tips. I am going to go lay down right after this.
I know.
And do some nostril breathing, alternate nostril breathing, because it sounds really nice right now as I'm listening to you talk about it. So you just gave a lot of wonderful practical tips that our listeners can use to get their practice going. And I think everybody should go get your book, Radiant Rest, because clearly it's going to be filled with so much valuable information. I can't wait to read more. I've read some of it and I can't wait to read it further and deeper. So where can people find you? How can they get your book? How can they take some of your courses?
Yeah. So the book, if you want to get the book, you can go to radiantrest.com. Shambhala is actually offering I think it's a 30% off with a RR30 code. So the code is RR30 and you can get 30% off. As you mentioned earlier, Marnie, the book comes with downloadable Yoganidra practices. So you can right away go to page 8 and get the special link to download those practices if you like. If you're interested in practicing with me, you can come to empoweredlifecircle.com, where I'm offering practices. And those two places are really good places to start to find me. Getting on my mailing list is also good, just to find out about some free things that I do and offerings that I have that might be coming up, like trainings, meditation teacher training or Yoganidra training.
That's, Marnie, I was actually thinking maybe we should do our next book club. We did a book club last year, the first one. This would be a great one because you could do check-ins and really help keep each other accountable, which is what I need when I'm doing anything related to meditation or my yoga practice. I really, really need that. That accountability and the group support. So I'm excited. And I've only done one Yoganidra class before. So I need to do more. I know.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like in-person one, like an actual, not in my teacher training or anything. So it's something that I know I will personally benefit from. And I know, Tracy, you mentioned that there's a free gift. There's the Tracy's Moon Nectar, which we'll link up in the show notes too.
Yes, that's going to be, that's a nice Yoganidra practice. The Moon Nectar practice. Highly recommend if anybody loves full moon rituals or doing something special on the new moon or the full moon. It's great to do outside under the light of the full moon. And yes, so that's one of my favorite practices.
That sounds wonderful. I hope it's like, I know it's going to be a full moon here in a couple of weeks before it gets cold here in Minnesota, because by the time people are listening to this, it's probably going to be too cold to be like outside unless you're really bundled up.
You can do it inside, and you can just have a window where the moonlight is coming in. And as you also don't need that, because we have the moon inside of us, like we have every other element and every other thing from the outer universe in us.
Yes, that's a very good reminder.
So, Tracy, as we wrap up this conversation, one thing we like to ask all of our guests is, what does the art of living well mean to you?
The art of living well to me means being able to weave awareness through my entire day and night.
So beautiful and eloquently said. Yes.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. And thank you, Betsy. I'm really happy to have had this conversation with you both.
And we wish you a great rest of your day.
Yes. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much for listening to the Art of Living Well podcast. We are so grateful that you joined us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or anyone else you think may benefit from this information. We'd love for you to subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, and tag the Art of Living Well podcast on social media.
If you want more inspiration in between episodes, you can find us on social media at theartofliving_well on Instagram and Facebook, where we will share snippets from our daily lives and our journey to living well.